Today we're going to take a closer look at the 18 to 55 and the 16 to 55 millimeter zoom lens from Fujifilm to see which one is better for shooting video. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal the Tech. Today we're talking about which is the best Fujifilm brand zoom lens for shooting video. Is it the 18 to 55 millimeter or the more expensive 16 to 55 millimeter? Now before I go any further, let me point out that these two are not the only zoom lenses that you can get for your Fuji camera. In addition to these, you can also get the 10 to 24 millimeter zoom lens. Now this lens, the 10 to 24, I purposely did not want to include in this comparison today. And the reason is because this is a wide angle lens and it's not as similar in focal length as these other two lenses are. Also, I want to point out that I did at one point test the 16 to 80 millimeter zoom lens. However, at the time I did my testing, I couldn't recommend that lens for video specific use as it had considerable focus wobbling when I tested it. Now to be fair, that was right when the lens was released and Fuji may have resolved the issue by now, but I returned the lens at the time and I don't have another copy to recheck that problem yet. So let me save some of you some time right now. If you don't ever plan on shooting video, ever, and you're deciding between these two lenses for still photos only, and budget is not a consideration, then no question about it, get the 16 to 55 millimeter. This is like having 4 prime lenses inside one package. And okay, you're all finished. No need to continue watching the video. So I put a link in the description down below this video to play a game of Tetris to keep you busy while we go over the rest of these items. Now for a majority of my testing, I used this Fujifilm X-T3 camera right here. First, let's get price out of the way. You can pick up a brand new copy of the 18 to 55 millimeter lens for about $700. The 16 to 55 is $1,200. Let's talk bad weather. This one is really easy. The 16 to 55 has weather resistance built right into the lens. That's what the little WR stands for. The 18 to 55 does not. Let's talk ergonomics. The 18 to 55 millimeter is fairly compact for the focal range that it provides. It weighs in at about 310 grams. The 16 to 55 weighs more than twice as much at 655 grams. And this can be a real problem with some video setups. So for example, if you wanted to mount your Fujifilm camera with a 16 to 55 millimeter zoom lens on it onto a Ronin SC gimbal, just like that, the lens is going to be too heavy. The camera is not going to be able to be held by the gimbal. The motor on the gimbal will say, and it will not work, and the camera will fall forward, or the motor itself may burn out. Either way, it will not be very stable. However, if you take the 18 to 55 millimeter lens, you can put that on the gimbal, no problem at all. It'll hold the weight and it'll work beautifully. And that same issue applies with overhead rigs, tripods, dollies, and just about anything else that you can hook your camera up to. That 16 to 55 millimeter lens is just going to be too top heavy. And if you add in a microphone and a video monitor, you are now talking some serious weight to deal with. That being said, if we're talking about the ergonomics of the lens only, such as the focus and the aperture rings themselves, the 16 to 55 millimeter is the clear winner. The focus ring on this lens is so much more pleasant to use, it's wider, and it allows you more refined control over your ability to zoom in and out for video. Overall, however, size matters, and the bottom line here is that the 18 to 55 is so much smaller and lighter that this is the clear winner for me here. Let's now talk about background and depth of field. The 18 to 55 millimeter Fuji lens is what's known as a variable aperture lens. And what this means is that the aperture itself automatically changes depending upon how much or how far you are zoomed in. You're actually kind of limited by this. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, right now I've got an 18 to 55 millimeter lens on a Fujifilm X-T3 camera. When I have the lens zoomed out all the way to 18 millimeters, I can adjust my aperture all the way wide open to 2.8. You see that right there? However, if I start to zoom in, watch what happens to the aperture. Look at that. You see that? It's changing. You see that? Boom! I'm now zoomed in at 55 millimeters on the focal length, and my f-stop automatically went to f4. I cannot open up and make the lens any wider than that. And this is not as ideal as a zoom lens that doesn't change the aperture, that's fixed aperture throughout the entire zoom range. And the reason is simple. Look at this. Less light. You see that? If I pull back here, I'm at f2.8. If I zoom in, I lose the light. I'm now at f4, and I'm going to have to make up for that extra light either by raising the ISO or lowering the shutter speed or bringing in more light to the scene. And now let's see it on the 16 to 55 millimeter lens, and I'll show you the difference. Okay, so pulled all the way back out, I'm at f2.8. Watch what happens when I zoom in. Zoom, 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 nothing. Look, zoom, 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 nothing. It stays at f2.8. You see that? And the winner for depth of field is the 16 to 55 millimeter lens, where it stays at a fixed aperture all the way through its focal range. Let's talk autofocus. Autofocus on both lenses handled very well. At an f4 aperture, the video autofocus between these two lenses was identical with regard to speed. And I found the background to be very pleasing. And on the 18 to 55 millimeter, when I had OIS turned on at f4, that background did not stutter or warp at all. It just worked, and it worked very well. On the 16 to 55, you can obviously open up the lens to f2.8, which gives you that extra depth of field. Also, the autofocus noise is extremely quiet on either lens, so they get the same score there. However, regarding zooming in and zooming out with these lenses and using autofocus, they both perform just okay. When I tested each lens, I had my tracking sensitivity set to +2 and my autofocus speed to +5. And as I zoom in and out though, notice how the exposure seems to change and jump a bit. It did this for both lenses equally. For both these shots, I had the camera with fixed settings for all three exposure triangle variables. 1/48 the second shutter speed, 160 ISO, and a fixed aperture of f16. And I zoomed in and out from about 18 millimeters to 55 millimeters. So when it comes to autofocus, I would say that these are pretty much a tie. Now, focus breathing is a term that describes a change in focal length that occurs as a result of adjusting the focus distance of the lens. On this test, I set the camera to 1/125th of a second shutter speed, f4.5 aperture, and 160 ISO. When I went to pull focus back and forth, I did notice just a tiny bit of focal length change on the 16 to 55. But I was really eyeballing this, and of course, I'm not testing this in a laboratory. So I'm going to give them the same score on this one for video, but with a side note that I do think the 18 to 55 is just slightly better in this regard. Let's briefly talk color rendering and overall image quality. For both lenses, I found the color rendering to be nearly identical. However, for image quality, there's no doubt about it. The 16 to 55 is much sharper and more defined on all apertures. You can just see it right here. Have a look at this. Now, for image quality, no doubt about it. The 16 to 55 wins this category hands down. And yes, the 18 to 55 has wonderful image quality as well, but the 16 to 55 ratchets this up a notch, and again, it's like having 4 prime lenses in one single lens. Now we need to talk about stabilization. If your camera is not locked down on a tripod, having good stabilization on a lens is critical, especially when you zoom in to focal lengths like 55 millimeters on either one of these, and this becomes even more important if you don't have a camera with IBIS, such as the X-T3. So for example, here's the 18 to 55 millimeter zoom lens that has built-in IBIS turned on, and here's the 16 to 55 lens, $500 more I might add, on an X-T3 camera with no IBIS. Because the 18 to 55 millimeter has this little switch right here, okay, you can put this on pretty much any Fujifilm X camera and have your lens stable. However, not with the 16 to 55 millimeter. For this lens, you should use it on a camera with IBIS. If you do not have a camera with IBIS, you are going to need to use a gimbal, and this lens, as I said before, is very heavy, and you're going to have to get a very serious gimbal to handle it. So keep that in mind. And without a doubt, the winner for lens stabilization is the 18-55. Now, I want to point out that this is not a full-blown review of either one of these lenses, nor does it pertain as much to still photography. What I wanted to do today was put these two lenses head-to-head for video and just see how they compare. Something else I want to mention. While you do get slightly better and more consistent depth of field and more blurry background with the 16-55, I've found that going from f4 to f2.8 wasn't a big enough deal for me to warrant paying an extra $500 for video. f4 looks pretty darn nice to me on the 18-55. Both lenses are pretty much tied for first place. However, the final factor, price. I'm going to give it to the 18-55 since it's $500 cheaper, and $500 is a lot of money. And given the performance of the 18-55, it deserves a solid win in value for price as the single best kit lens that I've ever tested. And so ultimately, between these two lenses, I think the 18-55 is the winner for video shooting on Fujifilm cameras. However, either lens is great for video, and I encourage you to check out more detailed reviews on each of these lenses, especially if you're considering them for still photography. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you found the video helpful or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I'm going to be signing off now, but I will see you all in a new video very soon. Take care.